Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. This is an open Q&A. We're in this kind of strange hinterland between House of the Dragon finishing about a week or so ago and Rings of Power starting up in about a week or so. I'm slowly relaxing down a little bit for this little period in between, but I thought I'd just do an open Q&A. So I'm expecting questions about House of the Dragon. What did we just see? I'm expecting questions about Rings of Power. What are we about to see? And anything else that we cover on this channel. So, as always, patrons' questions will get priority, but I will pick up as much as I can that is in the chat as we go through. And I should probably also do the regular spoiler warning book. Spoilers are fine on both sides of this house in terms of House of the Dragon, in terms of Rings of Power. Book spoilers are okay. The books have been out for ages. Show spoilers are not okay. We're probably safe now on House of the Dragon, but on Rings of Power, I don't know any spoilers. I've just seen the trailers and everything that you have, but our wonderful moderators will be helping us protect ourselves against any spoilers that may be out there. Okay, so let's just get into this and let's start with some questions from my patrons. I'll pick up, I think, first on House of the Dragon, then the wider world of A Song of Ice and Fire, then I will go to Rings of Power, then the wider world of Lord of the Rings, and then anything else that people have got. So feel free to throw anything at me in the chat. I will answer it, but I will try and keep to roughly that order. Lady Pushkins, hello Robert. I noticed that in Damon's vision in House of the Dragon, Bloodraven had two eyes, meaning pre-rebellion Bloodraven, but he looks older. Do you think this is just show oversight? Also, what evidence is there that Bloodraven practiced sorcery? Is it just rumor? Okay, so in terms of the image we have of Bloodraven, in that last episode of House of the Dragon. Now, yes, I was excited. Obviously, this is Bloodraven. They made clear this was Bloodraven a number of ways. We had the wine stain kind of blot on his face. They had a literal raven coming out from it. And he was hooked up into the Weirwood network. This is Bloodraven. But yes, he had two eyes. Now, for those who don't know all of the history of Bloodraven, he lost one eye when he was actually quite young. I think it was 20, 21, something along those lines. In the first Blackfire Rebellion, he played an active part at the Battle of the Red Grass Field, and he lost an eye. So, him having two eyes here, does this mean that this is something special about him being young Bloodraven? I don't think so. When you say, is this an oversight on the TV show? I think it was just if they did an eye patch or something, it would look a little bit extra. And also, given the fact that we've got Aemond on the show, I think they probably would have thought, is this Aemond? They would have opened themselves up to a little bit of confusion. So they just showed Bloodraven there, which was absolutely fantastic. Now, one thing that I did just before this live stream, I did just a tiny bit of research. I do sometimes. The actor who did this was a guy called Josh Ben-Tovim, who I don't know. And hats off to you, sir, if you're watching this. He is a British actor and dancer, as far as I can tell. He's run a dance studio down in Bristol for quite some time. He appears to be, I would guess, in his 30s. Now, does this mean that this same actor could potentially be Bloodraven in the A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms series? Yes. I mean, I don't know. I have no inside information on this, but this is, I think, what we're looking at here is that they have opened up the possibility of a slightly older Bloodraven, because when we get to A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, then we should have Bloodraven somewhere around that kind of age anyway. He should only have one eye, but If they've gone with the actor, and I don't know if they have, then this is a kind of a longer term plan. So if so, I'm okay with it. That's fine. The second part of your question about whether Bloodraven, whether there's any evidence that Bloodraven practiced sorcery. Um, yes, there is a lot of rumor. And most of the information, well, we have two sources of information, and we have two. If you're new to all of this, there are two broad ways that George R. R. Martin tells his stories. One of them is a personal perspective. Everything in A Song of Ice and Fire and Dunk and Egg is from a person's perspective. Now, what that means is that you get that person's prejudices, you get that person's limitations in understanding stuff, but it is very visceral. It's very uh, in the moment. The other way he tells this story is in A World of Ice and Fire and Fire and Blood, where this is an in-world history written by maesters. And then you get kind of the opposite problem, is that they weren't there. They're just writing this history a bit later with their own prejudices. They are taking sources from various places, and it may not be the truth of what actually happened. So when we're talking about Bloodraven, we don't have, except for one very small moment in the third Dunk and Egg novella, we don't ever see him face to face. All we have are, firstly and mostly, what the maesters have said. And secondly, some reminiscences from A Song of Ice and Fire about, or in Dunk and Egg, about who this person might be. So you get Maester Aemon talking about him very briefly in A Song of Ice and Fire. In Dunk and Egg, you get a lot of people. He's the overarching kind of political figure in the world of Dunk and Egg at this moment. And we get a lot of people who are talking about him who have similarly never met him, but they know him by reputation. Then the Maesters talk about him. Now, can we therefore say that he definitely used sorcery? No, because we don't see it. But when the Maesters, even the Maesters, kind of admit it, and the Maesters have got a very anti-magic slant, then you sort of assume that there was some kind of sorcery going on. So that's the backdrop. The more specific thing we have is in the third Dunk and Egg novella, The Mystery Knight, where he appears at the end of the story, and that's him, but, and I'm not going to get into all of the detail right now, but it seems pretty clear to those people who have kind of like broken this down in really granular detail that there's a character called Maynard Plum, Sir Maynard Plum, who is almost certainly Bloodraven with a glamour in disguise, checking out what's going on. I 100% subscribe to that, just so you know. And is it clear that that is him doing sorcery? Well, you could answer against it, but I think for me, no. We know he did sorcery. We know that certainly later on in life he was a part of the Weirwood network, so he was a green seer. Bloodraven was, in any way you wish to describe it, he was a magician. He was a magic user. He was a sorcerer. Maura Lee. Hi there, Maura. Great to see you. Thank you so much for the super chat saying just a show of love and support. Thank you for the fabulous content, merch, and stories. Looking forward to the Rings of Power coming up soon. Hugs to your handsome dog, Dan. You are the best. Well, thank you. Dan has gone upstairs. He had to be persuaded today. Normally, he very happily goes upstairs just before the live stream. This time he went upstairs and then came back downstairs again and kind of wanted to go to bed but wasn't sure what was going on. So he has gone up. I'm sorry. But yeah, thank you. And I will use this, Maura, if you don't mind, as a chance just to point people, if you wish to get uh, audiobooks of the what I consider to be the best science fiction and fantasy stories ever written, certainly the classics of the genre, then I've done that over on The Well Told Tale. That's, um, I mean, it's a passion project for me. I want to share th- the best stories, I think, that have ever been written. And I want that to be free for people. There are no adverts in the middle of it. It's just me telling a story. So if that works for you, if you like the idea of Conan, if you like the idea of H.P. Lovecraft, I don't know, Frankenstein, all of the absolute classics, then I've got them over on The Well Told Tale. It's available as a podcast. You don't have to stay here on YouTube. If you'd rather get them as a podcast, then go over and do that. So that's a thing. I mean, I don't make much. In fact, I don't make any money from that. That's it's break even at every point. Whenever the viewership gets high enough that it earns me a bit more money, then I just put that back into production. So it's something that I care passionately about. So if you like great fantasy and science fiction stories, then please do check out The Well Told Tale. Okay, and I think Mara Lee also saying to all my fellow mods, you guys rock. Yeah, well, let's do an early shout out to the moderators. If you're here in the chat, um, please just give a little bit of love to the moderators. They do an amazing job just keeping all of the spoilers away, but also keeping this. And this means a lot to me because it's not something you can really sort of put down easily on a piece of paper, but keeping this an uplifting place, keeping this somewhere where everyone can just be here and talk about the stuff we love without worrying about whether anyone's going to judge us or anything like that. So feel free to give a little bit of love to the moderators because they are amazing. Weirwoodnet, thank you so much for saying when in doubt, drop a dono. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Um, let's go to one of my patrons. Let's go to Diego Godoy saying, Hola, Robert. Hola to you. Why does Helena appear in Damon's Weirwood dream? Is she connected to the old god's magic? Thank you. Well, I tried to answer this last time, but I'm happy to try again because it's not clear. So, if you go back to that last episode of House of the Dragon, you get Daemon who's there with his weirwood dream. He's put his hand up. There's no mistake this time. He's put his hand up into the weirwood tree and he gets the visions. At the end of it, we cut across to Helena. Now, if the show wanted to, they could roll back on this. They could say, yeah, that was just a jump cut from Damon to Helena. She saw something and she spoke out into the something, and Damon saw something and he was reactive. They could. We don't actually 100% see them together in the same kind of magical space. So if they want to, they can. But it seems very clear that that wasn't the intention. The intention was for us to see Damon having a weirwood vision and then Helena interjecting, if that's the right word. So what does this mean? Well, if that is the case, if that's true, then that means that magic and it means huge things, I should probably say. It means that magic is not just lots of different types of magic. Here's weirwood magic. Here's the law magic. Here's the magic of the drowned god. Here's the Targaryen magic. All of the magics, or at least these two, tap into the same thing. It's just you're going at it in slightly different directions. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it makes Helena probably the most powerful dragon dreamer we've seen so far. Because it's not just that she has her dreams that she can give to other people, but she can experience somehow. She must have known in somehow. Oh, over there, he's having a weird dream. I'm going to get in on that. It it elevates her to another level. Not just someone who gets random visions that she can't quite explain, so she has to sort of talk to them. Oh, the beast below the boards. That's not where she's at. She's upped her game. Now, they have slightly foreshadowed this or explained this, perhaps, in as much as in season one with Helena, she was very cryptic. Even at the start of season two, you didn't know exactly what she was talking about all the time. Um, you looked at it and she's there, so oh, like one of my crickets or whatever it was she had in the little cages, they've died. And we're going, what does that mean? And then she's talking about the beast below the boards, and then we're debating whether that meant what happened at the dragon pit or what happened with blood and cheese. So it's quite cryptic. It's not 100% clear. Something changed in the show after Blood and Cheese with Helena. Because every conversation she has before that is slightly, oh, is this cryptic? What's going on? Every conversation she has after that, it's quite clear what she's talking about. That conversation she had with Aemond was just very clear. You're going to die here at that point. And she interjects herself into Daemon's vision and is talking to him. Even when she and Alicent, her mother, are talking, then she's clear with what she wants. I mean, I don't want to go out on that night march through the city, where Alicent says to her, "Have you ever thought about running away?" It's like, where would I go? It's very clear. She is actually communicating in a very strong way that she never did before. So the show have shifted her character. And this does coincide with the moment in the books where she kind of disappears. Because in the book, Fire and Blood, after Blood and Cheese, she's, and they use different phrases for this, but she's a broken woman. She not only witnessed the murder of her son, but she was made to choose which son to kill. And the one that she chose is still alive and can look at her and say, you told them to kill me. And that broke her as a person. And we understand the psychological impact of that is massive. And we understand that as readers. And what follows in the book is that she then just basically goes in her room. And every time we hear from her, it's not good. On the show, they've shifted that. On the show, she is now quite coherent. She doesn't seem to be mourning huge amounts, and she seems to be looking to the future. So this is one of the. Then they made quite a few changes. House of the Dragon season 2. This is one of the biggest, but often under the radar changes. Is Helena should be out of the story at this point, but she isn't. In fact, she's becoming more and more relevant. So keep an eye on that for season 3. Wooga Wombat, thank you very much for the super sticker. I hugely appreciate that. I think that was your first one as well. I appreciate that. Sarah O'Connor, fine art. Good to see you, Sarah. Saying, are Vhagar's wings repairable? I mean, it's a good question. We don't have enough Dragon Lore knowledge to kind of work through this. So Vhagar has got holes in her wings. I think it's probably fair to say that they won't get repaired in the show. Vhagar, and spoilers again. Uh, Book spoilers are okay. They will probably go with this on the show, but I can't be 100% certain. Um, Vhagar's not long for this world. Maybe a season. Vhagar's wings are not going to be repaired. Can dragon wings get repaired? I think the implication from Vhagar and other dragons that have got kind of holy wings is that they're kind of like other animals in that respect. Yes, dragons are magical, but in terms of their physical form, if they get a break and a cut in a wing, then that stays there. It might repair itself a little bit, but it stays there. And the more important point, not just Vhagar, is Sunfire. Now, it, it's important to say with the book Sunfire survives. We don't know what happens to show Sunfire. We're told Aegon is there saying, "Oh, Sunfire's dead." Probably that's not right. Probably Sunfire survived. And the way that George R. R. Martin writes survival Sunfire is as a broken dragon who cannot ever become truly airborne and beautiful as was. Sunfire was the most beautiful dragon that Westeros has ever seen. And Sunfire gets burnt, Sunfire gets badly damaged by the fall, and is lying there outside Rook's Rest for a long time. Now, I said this on a previous stream, and I don't think this will happen, but I'd love it to. As a cold open to season 3, they had a cold open to season 2 with Winterfell, but as a cold open to season 3, a couple of people that we just don't recognize saying, "There's a dragon there that seems pretty much dead. Shall we just finish it off? Shall we get the dragon scales must be worth something. Can we just go over there and just get them?" And they sneak up, and then Sunfire arouses itself, kills them, and then somehow just manages to get airborne and fly off. And we see the importance of that right at the end of the season, or at the beginning of next season 4, perhaps. That would be amazing. I would absolutely love that. I don't think they'll do it, but if I were writing, and I've said this so many times, if I were writing it, that's what I would do. Steve saying, "Are these changes or just different POV?" Rhaenyra says that the two dragons attacked Rhaenys. It made me wonder how much is changed versus being a POV based on the person telling the story in the book. Okay, we're talking about the Battle of Rook's Rest. So we have to kind of take a step back and unpack what's happening on a number of levels here. The way Ryan Condal, the showrunner, talks about it is that he has had to pick an absolute truth. The way that Fire and Blood is written, if you've read it, you will know that it's written as a history, but not as a thread going through saying this is definitely what happened all the way through. But a lot of important points with Fire and Blood, the Maester goes, we don't actually know. This is what my first source says. This is what my second source says. This is what my third source says. Personally, I favor the first or whatever. But maybe there's some truth in the others. That's the way that Fire and Blood is written. So when we come to something like Rook's Rest, the showrunner was of the opinion I have to create what is the truth for the show canon. And that means that when we're breaking apart the two canons, then we now know what happens over in show canon, but we still don't know what happens in book canon. When you say, is this just a different POV? Yes, it is, but show canon is omniscient POV. Now, there have been, feel free, for those who are like TV and film critics, um, then feel free to overrule me in the chat because there are layers to this quite clearly. But what we've got going on here is that the TV show has established a POV that works, and that is a bouncing POV between different characters. And when we come to the Battle of Rook's Rest, we moved between what Rhaenys saw, what Aemond saw, what Aegon saw, what Kristen Cole saw. I think possibly also effectively we dropped into the Fenders of Rook's Rest, a couple of other places, and we saw this from their POV, but it is an omniscient effectively an omniscient narrator showing us what actually happened, which is very different from the way that the books work it, which is that we don't actually 100% know. We've just got what different witnesses tell us. So this all, and I know this is slightly highfalutin, but this all brings us back to how George R. R. Martin has conceptualized canon in his wider world. And I would refer you, I'm sure one of the moderators will be able to do this, but he did an interview 2 years ago with History of Westeros that I don't just plug because they're friends of the channel. I think it's genuinely the most important George R. R. Martin interview we've had in the last half decade, maybe even more, because he unpacks this idea of these two canons. This idea that he has his book canon, he's in charge of that. That's fine. And then we have a show canon. And he sees the show canon as being something that he has an input into. He definitely has an input into, but he's not in charge of. His role, as far as he is able, is to do two things. The first thing is to try and keep show canon as close as he can to book canon. The second thing is to keep show canon as close as he can to other bits of show canon, which right now means keeping House of the Dragon close to Game of Thrones. But in the future, and we'll come on to this, but given the amount of possible TV shows in the works, in the future, this might start getting more complicated because you're going to get another showrunner who's going to do a Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and then probably another showrunner who might do Aegon's Invasion, and then another showrunner who might do Corlys Velaryon's Voyages, and all of those things have to be kept together. So, this is quite a long answer. Probably not exactly what you were looking for. But from my perspective, what we've got here is these two different bits of canon that we have to hold up as different worlds, basically, now. And when you're saying, are they changes or different POVs? I think a little bit of both is the short answer on that. Another question from the chat, Martin S. Hi there, Martin, saying, I don't feel sympathy for Team Green over Blood and Cheese. I feel empathy for the murdered innocent child, but that isn't the same thing. Aemond escalated the conflict to murder level on their behalf. Yeah, so should we feel sympathy for Team Green? I think we should feel sympathy for the innocent characters. in Blood and Cheese. Personally, I think we should feel sympathy for Helena. This is and Rhaenyra absolutely nailed this. Is like why on earth would I try and exact revenge on Jacaerys, Prince Jacaerys? Why would I want Helena, of all people, she says, to suffer like I did? I think we're supposed to feel sorry for Helena. I think we're supposed to feel sorry for Jacaerys and Jaehaera. I think we're supposed to feel sorry for that whole core family group. That doesn't mean that we should feel sorry for Team Green as a whole. Um, when you say Aemond escalated the conflict to murder level on their behalf, I think the way that George R. R. Martin has set this up in the book is that perhaps, just perhaps, there could have been a chance to stop this very, very early on. And then Aemond killed Lucerys, and Team Black were distraught. Perhaps then they could have said, "Okay, we'll try and get some peace," but they don't. Daemon takes over. Rhaenyra in the books, Rhaenyra isn't in a position to be making any decisions. Daemon takes over and then basically orders Blood and Cheese. Once that happens, no, there's no real going back. At that point, everyone has lost someone that they care about. So I think, yeah, we shouldn't feel sorry for anyone. This is a classic tragedy in the proper sense of the uh, kind of theatrical genre of tragedy, which is you create these characters and then you create a spark of an event. And if the characters are strong enough, you should, if you sit down and think about it, you should know how everyone's going to react to this event as it follows through. And A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D. And it should just be obvious. And it's a tragedy because there's actually nothing anyone can do about it. Chaos Ballerina picking up for Bishop Drake. Thank you so much. I love it when people pick up questions for other people, saying, is it possible that Damon's Harrenhal arc is fleshing out why he cut the tree other than marking time and why it bleeds every spring? I mean, I think it's more than possible. I think that they will definitely make this link. So for those who don't know this, so Damon, we've seen his arc here in season 2 of House of the Dragon. What, at a very high level, I'm skipping over the details, at a very high level happens next in certainly in the book in Fire and Blood is that Aemond comes in. Daemon's gone. Daemon and Rhaenyra take King's Landing. Aemond arrives there at Harrenhal. He's angry. He's made a mistake. They've taken King's Landing, and he lets his anger out first on House Strong, and then out over the wider Riverlands. He rides Vhagar out, tries. He's obsessed with Daemon at this point. Tries to find Daemon, burns down various places in the Riverlands, takes Alys Rivers as a lover, and eventually Daemon, who's on a slightly different arc, he goes, "All right, I'll do this." The main person now opposing Rhaenyra in King's Landing is Vhagar with Aemond. So he goes up to Harrenhal and he lands there, and he's there and he basically puts the call out. I'm here. If you want to face me, I'm here. I'm at Harrenhal. I'm not going anywhere. And he waits for 13 days. Every day that he waits, he takes his sword and he slashes at the weirwood tree. And to this day, we're told that those slashes are still there and they weep. And you see the weirwood sap coming out from those slashes. So, is what happened to Daemon a setup for that? Almost certainly, I'm sure they will have thought about this, and we can often be a little bit disdainful of the writers' room. They've got people who not just know the law inside out, but they love the law. So uh, they will have thought forward to what happens in Harrenhal later. They will have thought, why did Daemon do that? I personally wonder whether the route that they're going down is not just Damon's, and in the book, it seems to be Damon's just an angry and frustrated man, and he's waiting for Aemon to be there, so he's like hitting out. On the show, given Damon's experience, I wonder whether they are seeing that as a way of him taking something out on the Weirwood Tree. The Weirwood Tree gave him this vision of Rhaenyra on the throne, and he worked his way towards that. But then Rhaenyra seems to have turned her back on him, and Rhaenyra then lost her throne in King's Landing, got kicked out. As far as Daemon is concerned, then both of his children are, well, one of his children is lost. He thinks that Viserys was lost and probably killed during the Battle of the Gullet. Aegon is with Rhaenyra, and he's probably frustrated. He's probably angry. He's been given this vision of what your role is to get Rhaenyra on the throne, and within 6 months she's had to flee. So he's probably angry with the Weirwood Tree. So I think that's what they're setting up here, is that he gets this vision, and then later on he goes, well, hang on a minute, I changed my entire worldview based on this, and you told me my job was to get her onto the throne, and that didn't work. I did my piece. I did everything I should have done, but then she got hounded back off of the throne again. So he is understandably angry about this. I think that's me caught up in the chat. Let's go to a question from Maura Lee. Hi there, Maura, saying this season Alys Rivers played an important role in helping Daemon see, via his visions, that his true role in this war and the reason why it is so important to back his wife is to become, for her to sit on the Iron Throne. What do you think will be her role moving forward in the next 2 seasons? What kind of role do you see her taking once the war is finally over and the Hour of the Wolf comes to set things right? Well, just on a slight aside on the Hour of the Wolf, my personal take has always been, and thank you, Mara, for the question. Um, uh, my take on the Hour of the Wolf is that the fandom have kind of built this up as, yeah, it's the Starks coming in, they'll sort it all out. In the book, whether they go with this in the show, I don't know, but in the book, it's very clear that the war by that point has been rumbling on for a long time, and most people in King's Landing are sick of it. They want to end fighting, which is a good thing. We want an end to war. And then down come Cregan Stark and his army, and they want to carry on the war. They want to, first of all, take control in King's Landing. Then it's like, well, who's now opposing us? Oh, shall I go over and attack Casterly Rock? All right, let's do it. So that is what the Cregan Starks Winterfell's soldiers are about. It's not just, oh, let's restore peace and justice. They want war. The people who came south consider themselves dead. The moment they passed the neck, they thought, I'm going to die down south. They've made that decision. So they're there for war. At a point when the Seven Kingdoms no longer wants war. So the Hour of the Wolf, yeah, it's cool. But we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves and say that the Hour of the Wolf um, helps the Seven Kingdoms. The people who save the Seven Kingdoms are those people who work against Cregan Stark, not for him. But as I say, that wasn't in any way an opposition to what you're saying, Mara. But I think that um, the first part of your question, when you're saying what's Alys Rivers, I think this is a fascinating question because we do have to dig into this. What is Alys Rivers' role in the next couple of seasons? Because in the book, she's barely been introduced here. We read there's one sentence that whatever her powers, Daemon seems to have been immune to them. So we're told that Daemon is immune to Alys Rivers' powers, and we've been told that he was not on the House of the Dragon. We've been shown that. So the clear implication is that he didn't say anything. And frankly, all of those visions, if he didn't say anything, if no one else said anything, then no one would ever know. Aemond, however, takes her into his bed and she becomes pregnant with his child. So what is, and he seems to actually genuinely, I don't know whether fall in love it's the right word, but care for her. He comes rushing back when he leaves her in Harrenhal and she comes under attack. He comes rushing back to help her. When he comes to confront Daemon, then she's there on the dragon with him. So she is a fascinating character who I think we have to now look at and say, what do the Weirwood Network want at this point in time? Trying to unpack who Alys Rivers is, I think, is slightly missing the point because I think it's a matter of what does the Weirwood Network want here? So, what does the Weirwood Network want? Well, with Daemon, they clearly want him to support Rhaenyra getting onto the throne. That's the main thing that was going on there. With Aemond, where this ends up in the books is with Alys Rivers pregnant with, allegedly, pregnant with Aemond's son, who she then claims is the heir to the Iron Throne. Now, do the Weirwood Network really genuinely think that Alys and Aemond's son would just be given the Iron Throne? No, clearly not. But we have a clear greenseer in Alys Rivers. We have a clear Targaryen in Aemond. Is there a chance that their child might end up being fostered somewhere into another house? The Blackwoods, maybe? Might this lead to Bloodraven 3 generations later? Maybe. Whenever we're thinking about what does Alys Rivers want here, we always have to think what is the bigger plan for the Weirwood Network? And I think it isn't just getting the Iron Throne. There's another layer. Okay, I've got a question here from can just find it. Martin S. saying Helena is arguably innocent too. In the show, Aemond loses control of Vhagar against Lucerys. However, Daemon also arguably lost control, but instead of those two, he hired for the vengeance. Yeah, so one thing that the TV show has definitely done is reduce the volition of main characters. This has happened over season 1 and season 2. So Aemond, in the book, it's very clear. He decided he was going to kill Lucerys. On the show, no, it wasn't anything. I mean, yeah, he was there trying to frighten Lucerys, definitely, but he didn't intend to kill him. So I think we can extrapolate that out to Daemon, who this is a lot more applicable to, um, and say, what does he want from Blood and Cheese? And we're not told. This is one of my personal great annoyances with the show. I love the show, don't get me wrong, I love the show, but the amount of times they panned away from Damon as he was about to say something that was potentially incriminating is huge. So when we get Blood and Cheese, they say, okay, so we're in here to try and kill Aemond. What if we can't find Aemond? What do we do? And then the camera pans away. So we never actually see him say the answer to that question. Similarly, way back in maybe even episode 1 of season 1, he is there having learned about the death of his brother's son, and what he says next basically gets him expelled. Did he talk about the heir for a day in a way like, it's okay, I'm still the heir? Or was it caring more about his brother? It happens off screen. So this kind of panning away is something that personally annoys me quite a lot. But Helena being innocent, I think, yeah, I absolutely agree. A question from Luna Cascade. What was the point of the Lannister mud wrestling? If only it were Thailand instead. That man's pride. That man's pride has pride. Yeah, I think. I think there are a couple of things here. The first is, for the last 3 or 4 episodes, I think we have to always interpret them through this understanding that HBO turned around to the writers with a couple of months to go and said, you don't get 10 episodes, you get 8. Now, I think those of us who are not actively involved in the day-to-day writing of a TV show don't get all of the implications of what that might have meant. But if you're writing a good TV show and you've got, say, 10 episodes, what you're wanting to do is each episode has an arc of its own. It works. You have this big planning meeting, you try and work out where all these different events kind of fit in, and then each episode should have something of an arc in and of itself. Now, most of the episodes in the first half of the season had a clear arc. You may have liked it, you may not have liked it, but they did have a clear arc. As an example, the Cargill twins, they ended up we ended up with that fight, but that was building up from earlier in the season. What was Kristen Cole's reaction to Blood and Cheese? That played a big role in what was going on. What was going on with Masseria was also a hugely important part in what happened there. So we get all of these plot points kind of dot lead to the culmination, what lead to the final point. Similarly, the Battle of Rook's Rest was the same. We see the build up to that through what happened to Aegon. The second half of the season, I suspect they cut up a bit more. They thought they had 6 episodes, then it turns out they only had 4. Now they could cut some stuff out and say, well, that will happen next season. But that still left them with the equivalent of an episode to cut. So they squished a few things together. A few of the episodes in season 2, in the second half of season 2, didn't quite hang together in the same way, and I think that this is the reason why. To bring it back to the Lannister mud wrestling, if you watch the behind the scenes stuff, then it seems pretty clear that they had an episode that felt quite dark to them. And Game of Thrones often got quite dark, but it was interposed with some comedic moments. And so what they did was they took the dark stuff and then they just threw in what felt like a comedy moment, basically. So that was what it was. It was just a bit of light relief. I mean, it was plot important. Don't get me wrong. It was plot important that Tywin should end up with the fleet from the Triarchy heading off towards Westeros. That was important, but how they got there, that they decided, well, let's make this a bit more lighthearted. And pardon me. For what it's worth, I enjoyed it. On that level, I thought it was silly fun. If they kept that up, then yeah, maybe no, but just for one episode, I thought it was silly fun. A question from Martin S. What I meant by that is that based on what we know in the show, Aemond has roughly the same level of culpability as Daemon, in my opinion. Both started something that they shouldn't have and lost control. Yeah, so the show have very much been wanting to echo Aemond and Daemon in many different ways. I think they are wanting to show, to a degree, it's slightly, the rivalry is slightly one-sided, in as much as Daemon just does stuff and Aemond just seems to sort of pause and think about it for a little bit. Aemond is the one who wants to have a fight. Daemon's like, whatever. So I think that's where we're at with the two of them, that they're trying to show this equivalence, but it's not real equivalence. Lady, Danny Busby saying, can you read my super chat above? I think you missed it. Oh, apologies. Let me see whether I can find that for you. We don't know for sure if Daemon dies in the God's Eye, and the Walker in his vision oddly looks like him. Will they make him a White Walker? I mean, I don't know about the White Walker looking like him. Feel free to speculate in the chat if that's true. It wasn't something I thought of at the time, I have to admit, but I'm always happy to be corrected. As for Daemon not dying in the God's Eye Lake, he's been told he will die. So I think we should probably go with that. The books suggest he died there. And just thinking about what happened, he was on a dragon at a massive height that fell into a lake. The impact killed the dragon. We know this. The impact killed the dragon. That's how powerful it was. It should kill a human. So we would have to invent something pretty amazing and magical for Daemon not to die from that massive fall. I I think that there is something in the idea that not that Damon didn't die from it, but the fact that he died in the God's Eye Lake, and that's where the heart of the Weirwood network are. So that acts as a kind of a sacrifice, and so perhaps his blood sacrifice kind of gets sucked up by the Weirwood network. I kind of buy into all of that, but um, I I think that means he has to die, not that he can survive. And I had a question from one more question, sorry. Here we go. Oh, Lady Sophia Valarion saying, "Greetings, Robert, and to you. My workday has finally ended, and I'm listening to your live stream during my commute home." Well, hi there, and hello to fellow commuters. Um, uh, Fantastic. Thank you so much for listening. And actually, while I remember people who are listening on things that I don't often acknowledge, if you're watching or listening to this on X, I know hundreds of you are. And hi, welcome. It's good to see you. I'm answering questions here on YouTube, but I know you're there and I appreciate you. So thank you. Uh, Commander Ray, Robert, the image you chose that image. The image you chose is giving me PTSD, reminding me of two dragons flying before one gets speared by Euron. Speaking of forgetting the Iron Fleet, will House of the Dragon and the Blacks forget the Red Kraken, who burned the Lannister fleets and sacked Lannisport in the books? Will we see him, do you think, in the following seasons? So, yeah, he got a couple of mentions, so show only people shouldn't be too surprised. Um, Dalton Greyjoy is basically the head of the Greyjoys at this point in time. And what we're told in the book is that Team Green said, "Would you like to be Master of Ships? You can come and join our small council, and together we'll be a lot stronger, and we can perhaps get rid of this pretender." Team Black, and this appears to have been a Bloodraven shift. Not a Bloodraven shift, sorry. I'm obsessed with Bloodraven. A Daemon shift. Daemon said, actually, why don't we go to Dalton Greyjoy and say, "We don't want you to be our master of ships. We don't want you to be part of the bureaucracy running our empire. Just go, do what you want, invade the Westerlands. The Lannisters are there, the Hightowers are there. Just go, raid them, see what happens." And Dalton Greyjoy, the Red Kraken, took them up on this. So the story in the book basically is that he goes off and he raids, in particular, Lannisport, and Lannisport. For those who don't know, we've got Casterly Rock, but then there's a city outside it, which is not as easily defended as Casterly Rock. And they raided Lannisport and put a huge amount of fear in the people of the Westlands. They moved up and down the coast, took a few other different places. After the war, Alyn Velaryon, as he became known, went over and sorted it all out. But um, during the war, the Greens tried to call him on side, and the Blacks actually won. So I suspect we won't see him on screen, but we will hear about him in the same way that we've heard a little bit about what's going on with the Hightower army on the TV show. Yeah, they're gathering strength, they're moving forward. The Beesbury's are being a bit of a problem. That kind of thing. We're learning a little bit about it. That we will probably get with um, uh, the the Iron Islands and what's happening with Dalton Greyjoy. Um, Question from Willie Biggs, sorry to be macabre, but favourite on-screen death? House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones? Mine is the guy crushed by Araxes on the beach. Um, I mean, favourite death is an odd one. Oh, something that has always stuck with me are the people who die when the bell from the Great Sept crashes on them after Cersei's wildfire explosion, because it says so much about Cersei. Is that she thought, I can blow up the Great Sept, destroy all my enemies, and everyone will be here to support me. And she's wrong on every account. Yes, you can destroy people, but the um, the people who we get who die are completely unknown to her, and it gives me echoes of what happens in the Dragon Pit in season 1 when we get Rhaenys rising up through the floor of the Dragon Pit. We don't see them because we see this through the eyes of the 1%, but the small folk died. People lost their father, mother, whatever. And that was just because the Targaryens couldn't even really think about or notice the small folk. That wasn't an issue for them. So when we get people who are crushed and die a long, long way from the Great Sept because of what Cersei did, that strikes me as what's best about Game of Thrones. I mean, as the main character, Ned Stark's beheading is still there for me. That was shocking when you read it for the first time. But um, it's the deaths of the small folk and whether or not people notice it. That's what really gets me. Maester Sketches, thanks for the many insights. Your channel has always been quality. Thank you very much. Do you think we are going to see the culture of the Green Men through Damon's streams? I think we've seen all of Damon's streams now. Maybe he'll get one more at the very end, but I think we've seen it. I think that the Weirwood Network have shown him and guided him down a path that he now seems fully subscribed to do. So why do they need to show him anymore? So I suspect with at that point with Damon. In terms of the Green Men, it's possible that what we saw, a person with the antlered head scurrying away, that was just an Easter egg for us. It's entirely possible. We've not heard. If it is, then thank you, Ryan. I hugely appreciated it. That was really amazing. If not, then yeah, we're looking at just like an average-ish um, sort of take that sorry, I should go back, start the sentence again. If we've not got that, then what we're looking at here is just I think that something that we will get a few glimpses of as we go through the show. So Adam Velaryon should land on the Isle of Faces. I don't think we're going to get the culture of the Green Men. I think we're going to get a few snapshots of them, but no great insight into who they are. Dr. Debunk saying, here's the thing, Damon was alive under the water in his vision, implying he survived the fall and the impact in the water. Yeah, I saw that too. I'll have to admit, I don't know what to do with that information. He should not have survived that fall. The fall was from a massive height with the dragons, and it killed both dragons. It should have killed him. So I'm going to take that as just being, at the moment, unless I hear otherwise, I'm going to take that as just a vision of him showing him drowning in the God's Eye Lake, because otherwise it'll be that, oh, so what? Am I supposed to be up there? Is that what you're trying to tell me? This is reinforcing that he's going to die there, rather than how he's going to die there. Danny Bosbay saying if Sunfire is dead, how will they end Rhaenyra? I think I answered this one a little bit earlier, actually. So feel free to scroll back a bit. But yeah, basically, I think he's alive. I think that just the fact that people say he's dead does not mean that he is dead. In fact, in the book, it's quite clear people have to believe that he's dead to make his return believable and good and right. So everyone has to think that Sunfire is dead, but they're wrong. Um, let's go to a question from my patrons. Um, Paul Al-Gaib saying, "Hello, Robert. In Fire and Blood, it is said that after the second fall of King's Landing, Rhaenyra headed back to Dragonstone partly because she wanted a new dragon. What do you think she had in mind, as there were no unclaimed dragons apart from the Cannibal and Grey Ghost? Uh, though we don't know the exact geography of Dragonstone, do you think it would have made a difference if she had headed first to the Dragon Mount instead of the castle to claim one of the dragons there?" So I did check what it said in the book on this, and it said she headed back to Dragonstone. Um, yes, because she thought she wanted another dragon, but because she thought there were lots of dragon eggs there. So that seems to have been her idea. We don't get into her head in the book. The book doesn't really go to that level of detail, but the implication is she thought, okay, so I tried to take King's Landing, it failed. Everyone I thought I trusted abandoned me, but King's Landing. When I was last there, I managed to go from not many dragon riders to lots of dragon riders. I can go back. I can claim a dragon for myself. Maybe I've got my son can have a dragon here. We can figure it out. We can grow again. King's Landing, sorry, Dragonstone is my home. So that's the kind of feel. And um, that means that what she's not looking to do is claim a dragon. She's not thinking, "Oh, cannibal. Yeah, I could fly him." She's going there thinking, "I'll set up a home here again." It's a reasonable castle. It's an island. It's pretty defendable. It's not the same as some of the strongest castles in the land, but it's pretty defendable. And I can hatch a dragon and then give that dragon 5 to 10 years. Then that will be an impressive dragon, and then maybe then we can go over and try and take the land back. Paul of a Took, great name, saying, "Hello, Robert. Hello, Robert, Dan, and the mods from Trinidad." So thank you on behalf of Dan as well. He has gone up to bed, but the mods, love you guys. You're amazing. Only yesterday I realised that Aemond asking Helena to accompany him to Harrenhal to confront Daemon echoes Daemon asking or commanding Rhaenys to fly to King's Landing to confront Aemond after Luke's death. I guess only on a rewatch is when we'll pick up on these subtleties. Yeah, absolutely. And one subtlety I would just recommend that you try and pick up on the show when you go to sort of rewatch it is the foreshadowing of deaths. Now, in particular, we have with Rhaenyra when Daemon has his vision of her sat on the Iron Throne with a crown on. What's happening on the crown? It's fire. That feels quite, yeah, of course, Targaryen's fire. I get it. But that feels quite foreshadowy. Then we have uh, the scene, and I should say book spoilers here. If you missed at the beginning of the stream what the spoiler policy is. Show spoilers are not good. Book spoilers are absolutely fine. I will happily talk about what happens in the books. But on the show, we had this moment when we got Baylor there with a crossbow, kind of pointing it at Jace. She isn't actually trying to shoot at Jace. There's a target slightly to his side, but she's there with a crossbow, and then she shoots. That feels like um, a way of gaining foreshadowing. Sorry, his death. Then you also get things like Helena, who in that scene in King's Landing where there's the riot, she gets shoved up against a wall, and then you can see she's surrounded by these spikes. Book readers will know the implication of that. So, one thing I would recommend you do when you're rewatching the series is try to understand what might be the foreshadowing for people's death. One other thing with Rhaenyra, if you look back in season 1, was when they go down, she and Daemon go down into Flea Bottom, and somebody comes across and says something like, "Hey, do you want to know your future or how you'll die, dearie?" And she says, "No, no, no," and they head off. But then the cut immediately after that is a dragon breathing fire. So keep an eye out with the show for those kind of like little hints of foreshadowing that are going on already. Catherine Furseth. Hi, Robert. I struggle to see the perfect logic behind the Weirwoods wanting or saying that Daemon's role is to put Rhaenyra on the throne and to fight for her. I loved his arc this season and fully accept the logic of him confronting his past, feeling remorse for not supporting his family, etc. If it stopped there, his arc would still end up in the same place, wanting to support his wife. But with that last vision, something I can't quite grasp was added. He is now aware that Aegon's prophecy is based in real events. But to be honest, Rhaenyra in the end will lose the fight for the throne and her life. So why is it important for the Weirwood network that Daemon is on board with her fight? We previously speculated that since Daemon and Rhaenyra's kids are the only survivors and the ones that bring the Targaryen line forward, they will win in the end. Is survival of their line what matters? So, yeah, these are big questions and ones that we do not have the answer to. If we accept that the Weirwood network are trying to manipulate events, then we have to say, well, what are they actually wanting? It's not just like, oh, let's have fun with Daemon for a while. Let's give him some random visions. The Weirwood network wants something from Daemon. And the thing they seem to want, based on this season, is for him to go, I need to care about my family. I should stop running away from my responsibilities, and I should put Rhaenyra on the throne. Now, whether we agree with all of those bits, that seems to be what the Weirwood network are wanting here. So the question is, was that last bit of prophecy actually needed for Daemon? Now, I am with you. I'm on the side of what he saw should have been enough for him to say, "Okay, you're the queen. I bow to you." And I think it probably would have been. In it on the show, I think we have a slightly well, let's say more nuanced opinion on this one. Um, in as much as we say, well, what are they actually wanting from Damon here? Uh, yes, they're wanting him to say, okay, I should take a back seat. I should let Rhaenyra sit on the Iron Throne, and then in time, I guess our children will inherit. But um, uh, there is another kind of like a hint that maybe Damon hadn't quite come over to that side completely, because we get Sir Alfred Broom, who's there, and he turns up and he goes, "Oh yeah, we want you, not the not Rhaenyra." So Yeah, I think that what we've got going on here is a question of what do the Weirwood Network actually want? And I think from what we've seen, the implications are they want the right bloodline on the throne, and potentially they also want the right bloodline that they control. And what I mean by that is that in the book, Alys Rivers ends up with a son that she claims is Aemon's and hers, obviously. Um, people, uh, sort of Game of Thrones fans have kind of um, steered clear of that, but I think it. I think there is a possibility here that what we've got is the starting, given particularly what we've seen with Bloodraven, is the start of the Bloodraven, the bloodline that leads to Bloodraven. If you had to pick a bloodline that leads to a member of House Blackwood sleeping with a Targaryen king and having a son who is Bloodraven, then you would probably go with someone who is um, not just Targaryen, but also with the blood of the first men. So somebody who is kind of the equivalent of the offshoot of Alys Rivers and Aemon Targaryen. So I don't know whether they're going down this path, but I think it's possible that they're going to this idea that the daughter of Aemond and Alice will become the start of our kind of prophetic Blackwood arc of characters. No evidence to support it other than a, well, that would make a good story kind of evidence. Um, George R. Tolkien, salutations, Robert, salutations to you too, sir. In the last episode of House of the Dragon, Jace is struggling with his mother's choices and the way she is choosing to go about things. Baela speaks to him and tells him to be more supportive. And she stands by his mother, and he will come around as well. But then at the dinner table, he takes her side many times instead of questioning her like he normally did. But she still chooses not to tell him about her and Adam going to Harrenhal. Do you think this approach she is taking will be the reason he chooses to rush off and make matters or take matters into his own hands and try and save his little brothers at the Battle of the Gullet? Yes, I think is the short answer. The way that they've gone with this character, Jace, is that he feels threatened by what his mother's doing. He's the heir. Pardon me. He's the heir to the throne from Team Black's perspective, but she is just mollycoddling him all the way through, and he wishes to stand up for himself, and we kind of understand that at a human level. But what we also see is that she ignores him. So uh, he comes to her with legitimate concerns each time, it has to be said. The first one is this legitimate concern about her heading off to King's Landing without telling anyone. That was very dangerous. That was their Team Black's contender for the Iron Throne, who just like goes, "Oh well, I'll go into the enemy stronghold in disguise, and then I'll come back out again." That's uh, an enemy stronghold where you might expect to be noticed by people who go like, "Hang on a moment, isn't that the princess? Isn't that the person we're fighting against?" The risks were huge, and Jace pointed it out. But the biggest thing, yes, afterwards he was kind of like sweetness and light, and okay, mother, you can take whoever you want over there. That's not a problem. He he was challenged by the new Dragon Riders. We saw didn't go very far, but we saw the to and fro with him and Alf White, and Alf White is like, "Oh yeah, we're exactly the same, you and I." Um, Jace doesn't see that, so uh, whatever other things happened, the thing that Jace seems most focused in on is this idea of his inheritance being questioned because he realizes that he is a bastard son of House Targaryen. He knows this, and the his mother has always denied it. But then he's there, and he basically comes up to her, and it's like, I know I'm a bastard. Everyone knows that I'm a bastard. You keeping up this pretense doesn't fool anyone. And in saying that I'm your heir, you had to point to some evidence. And the evidence that you pointed at was the fact that I'm a dragon rider. So this is Jace setting this out to his mother. Um, and basically he says, your claim that I should be inheriting after you is based not on how I look. It's based in everybody's eyes, not on whether I actually am the first in line. It's at least partly addressed by the fact that I'm a dragon rider. Now, if you suddenly open up, anyone can be a dragon rider. You can find someone who was slightly higher up the family tree. If they get legitimized and they ride a dragon, you can find one of them who's slightly high up the family tree and thinks, well, I could take this on. And Jace's claim is completely undermined. So I think that's the big thing happening with Jace, really, is that he thinks that his role and space in this is challenged by these new dragon seeds. Uh, so, what uh, what might that mean that he does next? Well, I think you're very right. Is that the most obvious thing that he does is he tries to prove his worth. And when we get the triarchy coming in, then he has to go, whether or not he knows he's going, pardon me, to the rescue of his brothers, I don't think is the issue. What he's doing is he wanting to show that he's he's the Dragon Rider. He's the most advanced. These other guys aren't. So yeah, they may have dragons, but he's the guy who's the heir. Lady Pushkin's asking who do pardon me. Lady Pushkin's asking who do you think whispered traitor last episode? If you missed this, this was actually one of my favourite bits of that last episode. Was that Sir Alfred Broom comes in and talks to Damon, and as he's about to say, "Hang on a moment, I think you should be king, not Rhaenyra," you get this whispered word, traitor. And I don't know whether you watched them with the subtitles up, but when I did, it was very obvious. It was in capital letters, traitor. And for me, it appeared just like a second or two before the wind whispered like that. And it was like, oh, hang on, who said traitor? And I had to kind of rewind a couple of times before I realized, okay, yes, this is the wind saying traitor. Now, we know that the Weirwood Network can do this when it's controlled by people, is that they can say certain things and it appears. So the Star Wars uh, uh, this is relevant. I promise you. There's kind of the kind of the Star Wars community have this kind of like the people speaking from beyond the grave, kind of like whispering with the Force, and here this is the same kind of feel, and we get in the book we get Bran through the Weirwood network who can whisper to his father. And also, we get the whispers when the Starks were like happily riding over a bridge, and then they kind of heard something that appears also to be a whisper on the wind, and that comes from the Weirwood network. So it's not just um, uh, Ran. This could also be Bloodraven. So, as a short answer to who said that, it was probably Bloodraven. Hilbus Korax saying, greetings and salutations, Robert and Dan. Thank you very much. House of the Dragon writers yada yadaed over Jason Winterfell, skipping the connection he built with Cregan. Will this backfire in the final season? Without that emotional content, will Cregan's impact on King's Landing be too one-dimensional? Uh, I don't know whether I would say they yada yadaed over it, but yes, so they certainly curtailed the connection. We saw Jace and Cregan, and they seemed to get on okay, but only for about a minute before the crow arrives. Oh yeah, your brother's dead. You should go. So they kind of cut it short. Now, Um, is this going to come back and bite them when they get to season 4 and we get House of the Dragon? And personally, I don't think so. So Cregan Stark offers more soldiers to head down south when he hears of Rhaenyra being hounded from King's Landing. It wasn't to do with Jace; it was to do with Rhaenyra being pushed out. So might we expect roughly the same? Yeah, I'd say so. Um, And does this mean that we're going to lose some kind of emotional link? No. So when the Hour of the Wolf happens, it's the Starks arriving with a massive army when everyone else's army is decimated, and they kind of turn up, and it's like, well, what do we do? We're trying to do the right thing here, and they want to go off and fight some other people who haven't technically bent the knee yet. Um, but they arrive to dispense justice. Now, do they need Jace to have had a really strong relationship with Cregan in order for that to work? I don't think so. By all means, one or two things, but I don't think so. Let's go to Ms. Fox in Arda saying, hi, Robert and Dan. I had some contemplations. Excellent. In Damon's vision from the Weirwood, I was wondering if it was Damon who was walking through the muck and blood or John. Also, I perceived the image of Dany and her dragons not as the prince who was promised, but as the one who brings back the dragons, as the vision shows Daemon that dragons die. So it's not necessarily telling us that Dany is the prince that was promised, since it's unlikely that George R. R. Martin will hand that information over on a platter. So yeah, this, Madrid. Um, sorry, why am I going with Madrid on this one? Um, we get uh, the vision that we get uh, with Dany. We're told that that vision is to give Daemon hope, and he sees sort of hope at the end of this, which is hope of dragons being reborn, which seems to imply that he does see more than just his own dragon die. And he doesn't know who that character is. They've got their back to us. We know it's Daenerys, but they've got their back to us. So we're left with this kind of thought that maybe in the same way that Rhaegar perhaps had a vision of Dany, that Daemon also had a vision of Dany and doesn't really know who this is. As for, is this telling us that Dany is the prince that was promised? I mean, this is a big. I think I've got a question on this later. This is a big old issue, because I don't think George R. R. Martin. And my take is that even if all of the books were written now and finished and published, we would still be debating over who Azor Ahai Reborn / the Prince that was promised is. I think George R. R. Martin has deliberately set up a number of different options for us, which means that whereas on the TV show they are very keen to make the link across to Dany, in the books I don't think that is so clear cut. I don't think we should necessarily interpret Dany as the prince that was promised. In on the TV show, though, you do have to wonder what they're doing here, because they could go with the big reveal, hey, Jon Snow is the son of Lyanna and Rhaegar, but they didn't. They just went with, okay, so we've got a couple of characters here. Dany, she must be the prince that was promised because Daemon sees her in the vision. I don't think it's that clear cut, and I don't think George R. R. Martin would want it to be that clear cut. Yes, he might answer a few questions every now and then, but he's not going to give away all of the secrets of the end of his story. And I think that even when he does reveal everything in the end of his story, then I think we're still going to be going. So the prince that was promised. Actually, what was important was not who the prince that was promised was, but how people reacted to this idea. Blitzen, hello Robert. I hope you're well. I am, thank you. I have recently been rewatching the first season of the show House of the Dragon, which has got me wondering about the psychology behind Daemon. Namely, to what extent do you believe that he truly loved Viserys? There are times when he seems genuinely caring towards his brother, but others when at best he seems unconcerned. On that note, what about the other people in Daemon's life, like Rhaenyra or Laena? Do you think he had any genuine feelings towards either of them? So we were told, and I like this when actors do this because it helps us to understand where they're coming from. Matt Smith, the actor who plays Daemon, had a big conversation with the showrunners in season 1 before the season, trying to understand Daemon's motivations. And one of the things they came up with is that he loved his family and two people in his family, Viserys and Rhaenyra. So on the TV show, the clear implication is that he does love both of them. Now, he doesn't always show that very well, but the implication is that he does love them both. In the book, we don't get that. We don't get this version sort of sent across as a challenge to what we already have for Daemon, which is that at every turn, Daemon Targaryen does whatever it is to get him closest to power. Who he marries, who he goes to attack. It's all about how does he personally get closer to power like this. So I think it's quite a big shift from book Daemon to show Daemon. Okay, let's go to wider questions about A Song of Ice and Fire. I've got 3 or 4 here. But I will take a moment just to pause before we go into this. I've already said moderators, thank you. Patrons, thank you. I can't do what I do without your support, so I hugely appreciate it. I try and prioritize your questions here in live streams, but thank you. Okay, let's go to DickCrabb'sSquire. Greetings, Robert. How did Garrod desert in the first prologue and only get captured near Winterfell? Wouldn't he have had to pass through one of the only 3 wall forts and therefore been stopped from fleeing? So Garrod is if you think back to the prologue, even like the opening called scene from cold open scene from season 1 of Game of Thrones. One of those guys survived. One of the Night's Watch survived, and he ran away. He ran south of the wall, and eventually got caught. And then we see Ned Stark behead him in that first chapter. So the question is, how did he get south of the wall, basically? And we're told that he's an old, established member of the Night's Watch. He's been around for a long time. He understands things, so he probably will understand that the wall is an imposing physical structure, but it's basically a magical defense. So he and lots of other people do have chances to get across the wall. One of them is climbing it. You can climb the wall. We saw that several times. The wildlings climbed the wall. Perhaps he climbed the wall. He could have gone through the Black Gate. That they didn't seem to be paying huge amounts of attention there. So yeah, there was an abandoned fort, but there was a way through. He could have gone through there. He could have gone all the way to the western end of the wall, where it's funny, it's kind of sunk down into a chasm. The wall ends, and then it goes down into a chasm, and we're told that the wildlings often sort of go down through that ravine and come out the other side, and there's not really much that the Night's Watch can do about it. So there are lots of different options here. And I think the key point is that Garrett had been long enough with the Night's Watch that he knew which would be the easiest way to get south. Ghost Dreamer, House of the Dragon character you'd most want to hang out with? Mm, uh, House of the Dragon character I'd want to is an interesting one. I mean, someone like Otto, I think, would be really interesting, trying to get into his mind. In terms of a fun day out, Damon probably is up there. I feel like I'm missing someone. Not Laris, but yeah, I don't know. Let me know. This is a perfect one in the chat. Every now and then I throw something to the chat. Which House of the Dragon character would you most want to hang out with? However you view that, just spend an afternoon or evening with, go to the pub with, have a chat with, whatever. I don't think there are many clear candidates, but I'd like to know what you think. Chaos Ballerina saying random, but I discovered that there is a Song of Ice and Fire ref in Pokemon. Shiny Trevenant, a haunted tree with a face, is red and white to look like a weirwood. Fantastic. Yeah, I didn't know that. I'm not hugely into Pokemon, but that does actually make me quite happy. People who are saying, who would you most want to hang out with? Alice. Yeah, I mean, I can see the attraction. Cheese's dog. Yeah, so Cheese's dog, obviously, would love to spend time with. Ulf. Lots of people saying Ulf would be quite good fun. And Klaus Ballerina, whoever would let me ride their dragon. Baylor says a few people. So Simon Strong, yeah. How much fun would he be? Absolutely. Callie Summers saying Rhaenyra, but I'm honestly just thirsting for Emma Darcy. I mean, that's as good a reason as any to be hanging out with someone. Helena would be fascinating, says Anonymous. Masseria talking about how to help the small folk, says Aegon Dragonborn. Yeah, I mean, I think basically Cheese's dog wins. But whoever we have alongside Cheese's dog would be the next thing. I think so. Kashta Griffiths are saying Baylor and Adaman. I think they are perhaps the most ordinary of them. Most of the other characters, you'd always be wondering if they're about to start a war. Lady Vaughan Strauss. Hello, Robert. Please pardon if this comes off overly complex, but Laird Vaughan Strauss, with his background in anthropology, and me, with my background in art history, are tired of our personal echo chamber on this topic. I actually kind of love that idea. We have an issue with understanding how the two main prophecies contradict, but being that they're not literal, it seems that there's a fair room for movement. First, there appears to be the prince or princess that was promised, who will bring an end to the long night by slaying the Night King with Lightbringer. Then we have Aegon's dream, where a Targaryen king or queen will unite the people of Westeros in a war to destroy the Night King and end the long night with dragons. Both sound cool, but one requires the child of a monarch with a blade, and the other requires a monarch with a dragon. Is it possible that the potential prince or princess and the king or queen are not all the same person? Are they two people? Or is it actually a Fantastic Four situation with the perfect balance of a prince and a princess, a king and a queen? And you suggest John, Danny, Bran, and Arya. Okay, so the prophecies we have, do they contradict? Well, the first thought we have to go with is the the boring one, that we don't actually know what either prophecy says. So let's start with Aegon's dream, A Song of Ice and Fire. It gets told to Viserys. If you skip a couple of generations, it gets told to Viserys. And then he tells it to Rhaenyra orally. She's not supposed to remember every word of this, but she takes a reasonable amount of it in. It's clear this is serious, so she takes a reasonable amount in. And then she passes it on to Jace. And if you look at what she says to Jace, it does have a very different kind of feel to what as a Viserys had said to her. So when you add this in over the generations, you're very clear that what you think may not actually, you think is the prophecy may not actually be the prophecy. And Aegon's original prophecy, through a process of, the game telephone or whatever, one person whispers it to another, the next person whispers it to another. That doesn't lead to a very clear um, description. So what Viserys is talking about is not exactly what Aegon saw. And what Rhaenyra explains to her son is not what she received from Viserys. So there are subtle differences going on there. And then we also get the prince that was promised prophecy, which seems to be thousands of years old. It seems to have been connected to Azor Ahai reborn. In fact, when Maester Aemon and Melisandre talk about these two things, they kind of use the terms interchangeably. But what do we know there about that character? Well, again, not huge amounts. What are they going to do? Are they there to be fighting? It seems so. But beyond that, um, they have a sword, and the person with that sword is the person who saves humanity. So we're not 100% told. When you're actually looking at the legend of Azor Ahai, it's very noticeable that we get a huge amount of a story about how Azor Ahai got his sword, but then not much after that. So um, these two prophecies might be contradictory, but we just do not know enough about them. So we get a little bit um, more on the TV show, but even so, it seems as if there's a kind of a fog of uncertainty going on here. Could it be four people? Yeah, absolutely. Could it be one person? Yeah, absolutely. Could it be two people? Again, yeah, absolutely. And we do not know. So, um, my take, as I said at the start, is very clearly George. If George R. R. Martin hasn't told us, then by the end of this story, we're probably not going to get a full um, breakdown of exactly who was the prince that was promised. Here's your three options. Let's tick the one that was right. Okay, that was there. What's with Azor Ahai? Is that a person? Tick. Yes, then we'll do that and we'll add you into the guest list. That's not exactly how George R. R. Martin seems to be working on this one. So, friend, this is kind of building on this. So, friend saying an angle of Aegon's prophecy that I'm not sure you've touched on yet is with the character's interpretation being the most important thing. I'm intrigued whether some of the big names will think that the fight for the Iron Throne needs resolving first. Dany would surely want to secure the Iron Throne before helping the North versus the others, and then we can have the scouring of King's Landing. But what about Jon or Bloodraven? Whilst Jon probably won't push for it, does Bloodraven believe that Jon actually needs to be the king of the Seven Kingdoms? So, yeah, we're not pushing for this at all, but the clear implication is that everything we've seen from Bloodraven in the book is pushing for Jon to be the prince that was promised, but not to be the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. Maybe the titular ruler, but not the actual. And that kind of goes for the same for uh, um, Dany and Quaithe, who's kind of pushing her agenda. Um, they don't know exactly who it is, and they haven't spoken to the other person. And there's an irony here, I think, with um, Bloodraven and Quaithe, because I and many others think that Quaithe is very probably Shiras Seastar, and they've both spotted the person that they think is the prince that was promised, and they're pushing their person towards what they see as their destiny, but they kind of get found out. Andrew Kay saying George R. R. Martin likes that ambiguity to drive future debate rather than spelling out specifics. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. Paul Al Gaib saying, hello, Robert. Both in the show and the books, I always wondered why Stannis never apparently considered legitimizing Gendry or Edric Storm. He had no heir, and they would have been the only viable candidates. Is it because he had other or fiery plans with them, or did he want to secure the throne first? Interesting question. And my take is that so Stannis did know that Robert Baratheon had bastard children. He did know that Edric Storm down at Storm's End looked exactly like his brother. He may not have known all the details of the other bastard children, but he was aware of Gendry. It has to be said. So why didn't he legitimize one of them? They were his brother's bastards. Very clearly, nobody doubted this at all. They were his brother's bastard sons, and there is, well, I think the short answer to this. Sorry, I was sort of ignoring there for a moment. I think the short answer to this is just a point of principle. Stannis is not claiming the throne because he thinks he can win it. That's not one of the main things that he's thinking about. It's that he thinks that his brother was king. His brother didn't have any true-born children, therefore he's next in line. So that's why he started this campaign to be king. Now, I did a little bit of talking a bit when I was kind of working my way up to this, about Gendry and Edric Stormont, maybe, they're the bastard children. Could he have legitimized them? He could have done. He said that he was king. He could have done. He says that he had the power to do that, but he doesn't. And I think there are two answers to this. One is a little bit muddy, but is definitely there, which is that I think this Stannis did not he didn't want to go down the route of legitimizing people who perhaps were kind of not pure blood, if that kind of makes sense. Ultimately, his whole approach was to say, I'm the king because I'm the next in line. And those people are not king because they're bastards of the king's wife. So if he were to turn around and say, I'm going to legitimize some other bastards, that kind of undermines his point of principle argument. Agree, we would thank you for simply saying Shireen in the chats. You're right. That's kind of the second point I'm going to come on to, is that he wanted Shireen to succeed him. And if he had legitimized any of Robert Baratheon's children, then they would be not just in front of him, but also in front of Shireen. If he legitimized them on the basis that they're behind him, which I guess he could have done, behind him in the succession, then that would then mean that his own trueborn daughter did not inherit. So I think the slightly nerdy detail to this is, if he legitimized them, they would be ahead of him in the line succession, and they would get in the way of this line of succession that he wanted, which was his daughter Shireen to be inheriting. But fundamentally, it kind of undermined his point of principle. I am the rightful king because I'm not a bastard. I'm my brother's trueborn brother. Hi, Farnsworth. Hey, Robert. I hope you and Dan are well. We are, thank you. I've been rereading Fire and Blood around the release of season 2, and the plotline of Aerea Targaryen continues to stand out for me. What could she have encountered alongside Valerian when they went over to Essos, and what greater purpose does her story affect the reign of Jacaerys? So, this is one of, may even be the standout story in Fire and Blood, or most memorable story in Fire and Blood, which is Aerea Targaryen, Targaryen princess, climbs on the back of Balerion the Black Dread, claims the dragon, and they fly off. And they disappear for 6 months or so before they reappear, and Balerion is not well. Something has scraped their nails down his side, and it hasn't healed up. And Aerea herself is, and this is kind of like horror. George R. Martin loves writing horror. He doesn't get a chance to write much of it these days, but he loves the horror. And she has got something under her skin, and it turns out to be kind of fireworms or something, and some of them are just little, but some of them are like massive. It's really disgusting. So what might they have encountered? Some kind of fireworm, some kind of experiment from the Valyrian freehold that survived the doom. George R. Martin wants there to be a degree of mystery here. He doesn't like the idea that everything is explainable. He loves the idea that he's set up this dragon who is the biggest, the fiercest, the most amazing dragon of all, and something nearly defeated it, but we don't know what. That's the first thing, is this kind of like love of horror. The second thing, which is tied in, I think, a lot with some of the themes of the Dance of the Dragons, is that Aerea Targaryen and her twin. Now, if you've read the book, you'll know that there's a little bit of uncertainty about did the twins swap over. We'll forget that for the time being. Aerea Targaryen was the elder and the heir. And as far as we are aware, she was Aegon the Uncrowned, as he became known, made her his heir. Now, when Maegor took over, that got away with her claim because her father was no longer king, so she was no longer heir. But Maegor said eventually, "You're my heir." Maegor wasn't having any children. There's a whole story behind that, but he basically says, you're my heir." And when Jacaerys, we often talk about Jacaerys as being like this good king, and he was a good king, but when he comes in and claims the throne ahead of Aerea, who both of the previous two kings had declared their heir. So Aerea, as much as anyone else, is this kind of like prototype queen who never was that if her father hadn't been overthrown, she would have been queen. If the person who overthrew her father had died a little bit earlier or got rid of the other claimants to the throne, she would have been queen. So what we're looking at here is someone who has a strong claim to the Iron Throne, dying early on in Jaehaerys's reign, which means that although we don't know what might have happened, other claimants no longer had someone to rally around. So that's the kind of the longer term political implications of what was going on. Um, Ghost Dreamer, how do we know the prince that was promised will do anything we'd find good? Maybe the old one caused problems, winter and summer balance, and the other's grievance. Yeah, so we don't know. So the prince that was promised is this prophecy that we don't know the details of. Um, how do we know that they will do any good? We don't know. But the the idea that the old ones caused problems, the others um, exacerbated them. It's possible with George R. R. Martin, but I think that we kind of sometimes overestimate the extent to which he is sort of creating the bigger universe. He is creating a massive universe, but at some point he had to stop. And so the who are the others question he decided on. He knows the answer to this question. It's very frustrating. He knows the answer to this question already of who they are and what they want. And um, the prince that was promised has much more value in a vague prophecy that this is the person who's going to defeat the others, just in terms of propaganda against them as much as anything else. But he's to create this idea of the prince that was promised. We have a hero who's going to defeat the others. That's really strong. Um, let's go to Gina Z. Hello, Robert. I hope you're enjoying a little R&R now that House of the Dragon season 2 is over. Yeah, I am a little bit, though I have got Rings of Power coming up soon. This is quite a long haul for me, it has to be said, so I will be a bit quieter. In fact, I'll say no, there won't be a live stream next week. I will be back in 2 weeks' time with a live stream. So next week, there won't be a live stream. My daughter recently mentioned that she wanted to see a Reigns of Castamere miniseries, but from the POV of the Reigns and Tarbex. I love this idea and was wondering what you think, since you've created quite a few videos from the perspective of alternative characters. Um, yeah, I also love this idea. Great idea. So, Gina Z's daughter, thank you. Fantastic. I would love that. We are now looking for, we should probably be clear, a live action show and two animated shows that we know nothing about, that they are working on behind the scenes with House of the Dragon and now Night of the Seven Kingdoms. We've got two things out, but HBO are looking for more. And George R. R. Martin recently said he was in Oxford a few days ago, and he said, yeah, there are 7 shows in development, excluding the 2 we know about, 4 live action and 3 animated. So even if we take away the ones that we know, that leaves gaps on every level. I love the idea of the Rains and the Tarbex from their perspective, because I think we've got just enough information to stick to George R. R. Martin's script and idea, but it would allow it to be a short series, I'm sure, but it would allow us to see elements of the Westerlands we have not seen in, not just in the show but in the books as well. We haven't seen the Westerlands at all. So yeah, I'd love that. Luna Cascade saying, do you consider Bloodraven or Bran to be the most powerful in the end? How long does a Green Seer be the one before needing to mentor another apprentice? Well, in terms of the how long as the one, um, it's uh, it's something that I think bears repeating. We've said it a few times in this channel. The Three-Eyed Raven is not a job title. It's not that there is a person who is the Green Seer for the Weirwood Network, and when they die, then they have to find another person. They have to apprentice them up. That's not how this seems to go. You are up there. If you hook into the Weirwood Network up in what we think of as Bloodraven's caves, then you're there pretty much for life. It's not a lot of adverts trying to draw people there, but people have heard of it. Or not. If heard of it, then the Green Seers who are there kind of reach out. But how long do they stay there? Well, you get this actually quite disturbing chapter from Bran. Bran, as a character, gets very dark in his last few chapters, and he kind of wanders around through Hodor as much as anything else. Wanders around the Three-Eyed Crow's caves, and he sees lots of what look like children of the forest just hooked up to the Weirwood Network, and they're dying. It's very clear, one after another, they're dying. And so the implication is that, first of all, there isn't just one, there's lots. The second is that once you get hooked up, you're there for life. And Bloodraven, see, he's got like a branch which comes out through his eye, and he's got other things which are kind of tying him into his chair. He's there for life. There's no real doubt about that. So these Green Seers are part of the Weirwood network. So it's not, at some point, I'm sure Bloodraven came in with his own ideas and thoughts, but he slowly will have got consumed and subsumed within the Weirwood network. Danny Bosbay saying, do you think we'll ever get a Dream of Spring? I hope so. I've long given up on the guessing game about these things. What I will happily do is report the situation as we have it, which is that George R. R. Martin said a year, 18 months ago, that he was 75% of the way through The Winds of Winter. And then a year or so after that, we had an update where he basically said he'd made no real progress. Um, my take is that probably means that we're still a little way away from it. It's not going to happen overnight. That means he's got about 400 pages or so to write, after which he's got to do a lot of editing. After The Winds of Winter is published, then um, I'm absolutely certain he's going to do some Duncan Egg stories. He may well even do Blood and Fire, Fire and Blood Part 2. Uh, but I think we're in as good a position as we have been for a while. A Dream of Spring, I hope. I see no reason why it shouldn't happen, um, but it'll be a little way down the road. Jerry McSendy, thank you very much for the super sticker. I appreciate that. Um, let's go to a question from Ms. Fox in Arda. I find it interesting how Aerys and Rhaella name their children. Assuming Aerys knows about this, is the Mad King, knows about the prophecy, which he did, because his dad was the person who was told that the prophecy of the prince that was promised has to come from his line. Can we say that Rhaegar is the male version of Rhaenys and Viserys for Visenya? Is Rhaella naming Daenerys an intentional snub or pivot from the Aegon Visenya Rhaenys triad? Um, it's an interesting question. We don't know. I think that certainly from what you've got there, Viserys does definitely seem to be the male version of Visenya. I think we can say that. Is Rhaegar the male version of Rhaenys? Maybe. Pardon, sorry, I'm yawning. It's not as clear. Does this mean when Rhaella named Dany, because the Mad King is dead by then, when she named Dany, is that to break free from any idea of we're trying to recreate Aegon's original sister wives? I can certainly buy into that. Um, it's not a snub because the Mad King was already dead by then. So this was months later. Dany was conceived within the last few days of the Mad King's life. So the birth and the naming took place maybe 9 months later. Uh, got some questions now. I think that's all. Feel free to drop more questions into the chat. But that's all I've got from my patrons on the World of a Song of Ice and Fire, House of the Dragon. We've got some Rings of Power and Lord of the Rings questions coming up now. Mara Lee saying, in the Rings of Power, we will see Tom Bombadil speak to the Stranger about the Stranger's role in the upcoming war with Sauron. Fans of the books may have mixed feelings about seeing Tom and the show, especially if the Stranger ends up being Gandalf instead of a blue wizard. What is your take regarding this? Well, my take on the Stranger and all of that side of things is um, this is either a completely new character, in which case it's not really going against the law, um, or this is a character that we know who is doing things that, in a period of time that not much happens in Tolkien and stuff that we don't know. So, yeah, okay, fine. My greater concern actually is with the Tom Bombadil thing. They've got a great actor for it, and I don't doubt that it will look good. But Tom Bombadil is 0% interventionist. And that's pretty much the main point of his character. He's not there to be encouraging people to do certain things. He's about being, experiencing, loving life. And for him to be traveling across to the other side of the continent to be advising people to do stuff doesn't quite hang well with me. So just in that world there, yeah, I don't think I really um, like the idea. The Stranger, I'm open to any idea these days. The way they ended season one was very strongly hinting he was Gandalf. I don't think we can take away from that. They may pivot from that so that he's one of the Blue Wizards or whatever. But I don't think we should shy away from the fact that they tried to tell us that this was Gandalf. Riley Jack Thompson's saying, "Hey Robert, curious as to what you think the next season of Rings of Power might have in store for us. What are you excited for? Any concerns you might have, or particulars you're keen to see? I'm curious to see how they're going to handle Sauron and the character that seems to be Gandalf. Yeah, so I'm intrigued by both of those things as well. It should be a lot more focused in on Sauron as a season of a show. Um, my hopes are that season one was, as they said, this was just setting the scene. Season two is slightly headier. I think that I'm hopeful that they will stick as close as they can. The butterfly effects of what happened in season one are going to be massive, but I'm hopeful with my nerd hat on that they stick as close as they can to the lore because they've they've got Tolkien's world to play in. This is the greatest fantasy world ever created. So when significant changes are made, it does kind of at a nerd level, it does kind of frustrate me. I'm expecting it to carry on looking amazing and sounding amazing. So that's kind of like, I guess, where we're at now. I'm kind of hopeful that it might go the way of Wheel of Time, which I thought season two was a huge upgrade on season one once they'd introduced everything. Um, I'm also kind of hopeful that they might abandon the more mystery box style of direction, by which I mean that we have something down in the Southlands which is clearly an ancient and dark magical object. And then that kind of like just gets turned. It's a key. It's a kind of a letdown. Um, I'm I'm hopeful that what we can have is something which builds on season one and is engaging as much as anything else. I think from what I've seen from season two, just the trailers as you have from what I've seen, though, it looks promising. But we'll have to wait and see. Um, Question from Yobi Guajardo saying, question about the apologies, I probably mispronounced your name there. Question about the singers' bodies in the cave. Could this is back to A Song of Ice and Fire, could these be the physical bodies of the others and they're trying to get them back? Hence the spell that keeps them out. No, I don't think so. The implication is that these are children of the forest bodies, not others' bodies. They're quite small, and we see a lot of the children of the forest there hooked up as if they're in somewhere in this process from going from an actual real life character to somebody who's subsumed within the Weirwood network. Um, let's go to actually, I think this is my last question from my patrons. So this is a good chance to drop anything else into the chat. I'll try and answer as many things as I can. Candy Summers saying, I wanted to drop by with a few increasingly silly Lord of the Rings questions. Feel free to just stop when it gets too ridiculous. Well, what I'll do is I'll treat these as a quick Q&A, if that's okay with that. sort of developing too much. But you start with a bit of time and distance. How much do you think the Rings of Power suffered because it was being compared to season 1 of House of the Dragon, and how much of it was objective about the quality? So, for those who missed the timing issue, this was um, uh, 13 months before Rings of Power came out. They put their flag in the ground and said, "This is the date on which our TV show is going to be airing." And their clear assumption was that everyone else is just going to move out of the way. This is the biggest budget TV show of all time, with the greatest fantasy world of all time. Everyone's going to move aside. HBO didn't, and they announced when House of the Dragon season 1 was ready, they went straight in and said, "Well, we'll do it when we're ready," which happened to be 2 weeks before the Rings of Power, which meant, well, first of all, this was quite a boss move. And I think we can say with retrospect, it worked for House of the Dragon, in as much as um, for House of the Dragon, when it came out, the first couple of episodes, people were talking about House of the Dragon. Where, oh, pardon me. And the first couple of episodes were good. So people were saying, "Oh, House of the Dragon's good." Then Rings of Power came out, and the headlines were not Rings of Power, the fantastic new chapter in The Lord of the Rings. It was, how does this compare to House of the Dragon? So everything that they did was always uphill in comparison, having to do comparisons with House of the Dragon. So I said I was going to do this quickfire. It's not really quickfire. So with hindsight, did that have an impact? Yeah, I think it definitely did. But my take at the time, I was happy to say it then, I'm happy to say it now. I think season 1 of House of the Dragon was very, very good. It was every episode pretty much was about the same level, 7 or 8 out of 10. Really good, great adaptation. Rings of Power had some fantastic elements to it. Uh, the look, some of how, like, Casa Doom, I thought was fantastic. A lot of the visuals were amazing. The music was fantastic. But some elements, like the writing, for example, did kind of pull it back. So if House of the Dragon hadn't happened 2 weeks in advance, uh, the headlines might have been easier, but the overall reception, I suspect, would have been very similar. Pious Ballerina, picking up a question from Sir Friend. Thank you very much. Do we think the show, this is House of the Dragon, the show omitting the part of Helena picking a kid to be killed who then survives, they are essentially giving to Alicent by saying yes to Aegon being killed and he'll find out? Well, that's an interesting question. So the Blood and Cheese, the thing which happens at the end of season 1 when Team Black Damon gets revenge by hiring a couple of people to go in and kill one of the Team Green princes. It's more psychologically traumatic in the books because they make Helena choose which of her sons she's going to um, allow to be killed, and then they actually kill the other one. So she's left not only distraught at the death of her son, but also knowing that she had ordered the death of the son who lived. So pretty horrific. Then we get Alicent, who is in episode 8, goes to meet Rhaenyra to try and find some peace terms, and is forced to decide whether to give up Aegon, and she kind of slowly nods her assent. Have they shifted that element over to Blood and Cheese? I don't know whether it was deliberate, but yes, the echoes are very strong. And could she have gone through with it more than just the kind of like the nodding? We'll have to wait and see, like Helena. But the the key thing about Blood and Cheese is that this traumatized everything and everyone who was involved. This was not just like, oh, they killed someone, let's move on. This was horrific. Alicent was distraught. Helena basically was never really seen from again. The murder of a child was so horrific, and the way it was done was so horrific. So, um, uh, putting or forcing Alicent to give up her child, it has echoes, but it's not the same. Stephanie Fredericks saying that Skibbertine dropped a super chat. He's just left his question again. Oh, apologies for missing that. Hang on. The show makes most, and I try sort of with super chats. Yeah, I know they're highlighted, but sometimes the chat goes by so quickly. Sometimes I miss things. I apologize. I always try and pick up what I can. Skibbertine saying the show makes most characters less ruthless than the books. This is the show being House of the Dragon here. Is Aemond the only one that retains book level ruthlessness? What effect does this have? Um, I don't. I think Aemond doesn't retain book level ruthlessness because the most ruthless thing that he did was the murder of Lucerys in the books, and that's taken away from him on the TV show. Even on the TV show, sorry, in the books, him abandoning King's Landing was because he wanted to go and face down Daemon. It was a proactive reason. He wanted to go and do this. It was a foolish decision, but it was a proactive decision. Uh, in the books, it is that's not really the sorry. In the books, that's what happens. In the show, he flies over to Dragonstone, sees they've got a whole load of dragons, and it's like, I think I'm going to get out of here. So it's less of a proactive, positive decision on his part and more of a kind of reactive one. This is one of the key critiques of House of the Dragon is they've taken away a lot of the volition from these characters. Um, who is still ruthless? I would say someone like Otto, if they bring him back, is that I think he'll still do what he needs to. Duh, 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 duh. I think I had another question here somewhere. Martin S. This is a Rings of Power question. The drunken idiot turning the key to open up Mount Doom was one of the more annoying things in season one, in my opinion. I think Melkor essentially created the entire fiery and volcanic element in Gorgoroth. Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely there. I didn't hugely like that. I thought it was. I should probably clarify. I thought it was a really intriguing and good build-up. What is this mystery sword? We have the hilt. Clearly has Sauron's mark on it. When it tastes blood, then it becomes a proper sword. All of that mystery, horrific sword dagger bit worked for me. The fact that it was then just a key, and personally, I felt that went a little flat. Um, and I, though that said, I do have to, at a kind of more meta level, I do have to say I liked the idea behind the South. I didn't like everything about the Southlands plot, but I liked the idea behind it. I liked this idea that we have these settlements, these human settlements near in and around Mordor, and the elves do not trust them. Even after 1,000 years and all the generations later, the elves do not trust them. That really kind of worked for me. Yobi Guajardo saying resending to get my question answered. Oh, damn, I missed a couple questions here. I do apologize. Let me see if I can find that one as well. Um, uh, So this is the question about the singers' bodies in the caves. Could these be the physical bodies of the others that they're trying to get them back? Hence the spell that keeps them out. So the spell that keeps the others out, I think, is just an anti-others spell. I did sort of. I think I started answering this and then got distracted as I sometimes do. Um, could they be the physical bodies of the others? I don't. I think they're the physical bodies of the children of the forest who have been spell singers and um, what we would call green seers in the cave rather than the bodies of the others. It's a nice idea, but I don't think it quite works for me. Um, let's have a quick flick through. I think, oh, Cast Ballerinas picking up a question for Rillick. For Rillick, hi Robert. Have you heard about the weirwoods in the wall theory? If so, do you think House of the Dragon implies they were growing or had been grown in the walls of Harrenhal too? I don't know about the weirwoods in the wall theory. I'm assuming it means that there are weirwoods inside the wall. Um, And just to pick up on that, what we're told is the wall, and the wall is it's not just a physical barrier, it's a magical barrier. And that's the more important thing. So when we were talking right at the beginning with Garrett, how on earth could he escape the north and get beyond the wall? It's because the wall's just a wall, and to humans, um, there's no stopping. There's no way to sort of stop. The magic seems to prevent undead passing through, but not humans if they've got uh, a right to be there. But the House of the Dragon implying that the weirwoods have been growing in the walls of Harrenhal. The way that the showrunner described this with Harrenhal was that the weirwoods tree is there. Atrocities were committed against the weirwoods, and now this tree is trying to reclaim Harrenhal with its roots coming up and growing in and around. So that kind of works for me. I mean, the idea that they're um, uh, the the trees are grown within the walls. I like personally prefer the idea that the one weirwood tree we've got actually works and will work if you sort of give it the right support. I think. Um, oh, one more question, Martin S. The key build-up worked well for me too, just not what it did. As did elves distrusting those humans. 1,000 years is not many elven generations. No, well, exactly mean 1,000 years. It will be the same elves watching out. I quite liked the idea that they didn't trust those humans, and it kind of underlined the elven ethnocentricity which runs through a lot of the Silmarillion. Let's. So Kelly Summers, I'm just finishing off your questions. Um, and then you asked about the Witch King and whether he could be the Witch King in the sorry, I'll just read this one out. If Tolkien had ever written a sequel about the Fourth Age, would we have looked back at the foreshadowing of the return of the Witch King? Because he just says when the Witch King dies that he was not heard from again in that age. Personally, I think no. I think that was just flowery language, which sometimes Tolkien did use. And then when did he gain his moniker of the Witch King? We don't know. He was the Witch King of Angmar when he was up at Angmar, but obviously in the Third Age, but obviously that was in the future for him there. The idea that he might be called a Witch King kind of works, but if he then was on Numenor, then as far as we can tell, he wasn't one of the actual kings, and there are no actual kings who are called the Witch King. So that's questions in my chat. Let's have a quick flick through, see if there's anything else in the So that was everything from our patrons, everything else in the chat. A quick flick through. Aegon Dragonborn, will the originally intended Jon Arya Tyrion love triangle eventually turn into Jon Daenerys and Tyrion? No, I don't think so. Carl Karsnark saying the Weirwood network are reclaiming and decomposing just like the fungi they resemble. Their roots are like tentacles slowly grabbing their surroundings. Yeah, absolutely. I think Callie Summers saying that was a very brief Q&A of one question. I think I answered two or three of those ones. But I'll put the ones I missed, feel free to put back in and I'll do for next time. And yeah, I think that is me largely caught up. So what I will do is I will be back here, not next week. I'm going to take a week off between House of the Dragon and Rings of Power, but I will be back in 2 weeks' time. If you missed it, they just announced when in the day the Rings of Power is going to be released, and it's different from last time. So quite significantly different. And if you're watching this back a bit later, feel free, and you know the answer to this, put something down in the comments for me. I'm intrigued why they changed it. So last time around, they did it at 2 a.m. UK time, 9 p.m. Eastern America time, which is kind of industry standard. That's when Game of Thrones came out. That's when Rings of Power comes out. But they're shifting it to be now, I think 8 a.m. UK time, which is 9 in the morning for Central European time, which makes about 3 a.m. Western US time. It doesn't quite seem to hit any of what we consider to be their main markets at prime time watching. Has the world of um, uh, online content changed so much that prime time watching doesn't matter? If so, why did they shift it to these times? I don't know the answer to any of those questions. Feel free to tell me. But I won't be here next week. I've got videos coming out, normal videos over on the main channel. Do not worry, they will keep on coming while I'm off for a week. But I will be back here in 2 weeks' time and we will start looking at the Rings of Power. So take care, everyone. See you soon and have a fantastic couple of weeks.